Hello and welcome to Granada Reports.
Hello, on the programme this evening.
From hydrogen-powered lorries collecting our bins to one of the country's largest bike schemes, the signs of a green transport revolution in the northwest. But are we getting enough help?
I want people to buy in, and I want the government to fund this properly.
Then came the Pells, with their brief but glorious history.
As we prepare to remember how one soldier's war journal is being kept safe for future generations.
Can David become $1 million man by being declared the best teacher in the world?
And on the whole, plenty of settled weather ahead. Join me later for all the details.
Well, first tonight, as the Friday deadline for a climate deal fast approaches, we're looking at our region's green transport revolution and asking, is there enough government support?
Transport accounts for 27% of all carbon emissions. And Greater Manchester's Mayor, speaking at COP26, laid out ambitious plans for Manchester to have the country's first carbon-neutral transport network run on sustainable energy.
That involves more people ditching their cars for bikes in a new initiative, which Andy Burnham says won't be a repeat of the doomed Mobike scheme, where the bikes were stolen and vandalised.
Our political correspondent Leisha McNally has our top story tonight.
At the COP26 summit in Glasgow, transport is driving the day. The Prime Minister hopping on the train from London to explore how we can all get around in a more sustainable way.
Here in Glasgow, the world is closer than it has ever been to signalling the beginning of the end of anthropogenic climate change. And it's the greatest gift we can possibly bestow on our children and our grandchildren and generations unborn. And it's now within reach.
But is the Northwest ready to go green? Or will underfunded infrastructure hold us back, despite the Prime Minister's promise of levelling up?
Do you use public transport?
I do on occasion when I'm going out, maybe going into town. Not for commuting really, because it's too connecting stops for me, so it's quite hard.
I drive a lot. If we're talking about buses to get around more, certainly for me to come up here, it needs to be more frequent.
Transport links don't come far south enough in Manchester.
There are plans to try to get passengers back on board. Greater Manchester set out ambitions to become the first UK city region with carbon-neutral buses, trams and trains in a London-style transport network. Andy Burnham today urging ministers to fund cheaper bus tickets, currently up to 3 times higher than in the capital.
The drive to net zero could be the way to improve people's lives. It could be the way to reduce inequality. It could be the way to close the north-south divide and level up the country, as the government is saying. There's the potential to create tens, hundreds of thousands of good jobs in the green economy in the northwest. There's a potential to give us London-style public transport that's much cheaper than it is today. I want people to buy in, and I want the government to fund this properly.
High on the international agenda is the shift towards electric transport, which could prove a major challenge here. The government cut grants to buy electric vehicles this year, and there are fears the lack of places to charge could put potential buyers off. Here in Stockport, there are 8 ultra-rapid chargers, but the Liberal Democrats say it isn't enough.
In 9 years' time, we're going to be taking petrol and diesel cars off the forecourts. So we need to incentivise people buying electric cars now. We need to start working that now. The council owns a load of car parks like the one we're in at the moment. We should be putting electric charging places, charging points in all of those car parks.
Stockport Council says it's investing in electric charging points and putting unprecedented funding into public transport. So North West councils aren't just waiting for the government to pick up the challenge. In Cheshire East, 2 bin lorries now run on pollution-free fuel made from hydrogen, the first trial of its kind in the region.
Certainly improving our carbon footprint. It's definitely an interim stage, and it's a learning process. These heavy goods vehicles, they use more fuel than any other vehicles in our fleets. So it's really important that we have a solution for these, because obviously they're producing the largest amounts of CO2.
Though one means of travel not on the COP agenda today was bikes. In Manchester, 250 million car journeys are less than 1 kilometre long. A new network of rental bikes unveiled to try to replace them. A similar scheme here failed 3 years ago. The Chinese firm Mobike pulled out, blaming levels of theft and vandalism. But the message today is it's time for a change. This week's summit, a crucial chance to put the wheels in motion. Leisha McNally, ITV News.
Well, transport is a big talking point here. Now, let's get the latest on the inquest of Yusuf Mackie, which has been hearing from police who were called to the scene of his stabbing in Greater Manchester.
Yusuf, a talented grammar school pupil, was just 17 when he died in March 2019. His friend Joshua Molnar was cleared of murder and manslaughter but served 8 months for lying to police.
We can cross live to our correspondent Amy Welsh. And Amy, the court's been hearing what Mr Molnar said to officers that night.
That's right, body cam footage played to the court showed Joshua Molnar at the scene of the stabbing. He's got no top on and he's crying when he tells the police officer he'd taken his shirt off to place pressure on Yusuf Mackie's wound. When asked what had happened, he replies, "I don't know." He said he'd seen him come round the corner and then fall over, and that he'd then seen a car driving off. The police officer then asks him who was responsible, and again he replies, "I don't know, I don't know." Well, that police officer today told the court he had no reason not to believe what he was telling him, that his account was detailed and convincing, but we now know that he was lying because he was responsible for the stabbing. He was cleared of manslaughter and murder after claiming self-defence, but he served 8 months for lying to the police.
And Amy, tell us more about the two brothers who were allegedly involved in a precursor event before the fatal stabbing.
Well, Ibrahim Chowdhury and Mohammed Chowdhury both appeared in person today after appearing via video link yesterday, but they still refused to give any evidence, saying they were worried about incriminating themselves, and they now have until 12:30 tomorrow to seek further legal advice. We did, however, hear today from another man, Ali Ezzedine, who drove the brothers to Hale earlier that night to meet with Yusuf Mackie, Joshua Molnar and Adam Chowdhury, and allegedly supply them with some cannabis. He said he'd never met Yusuf Mackie before and that he didn't get out of the car, but he refused to answer any questions regarding whether the Chowdhury brothers had assaulted Joshua Molnar or whether Joshua Molnar had at any point appeared to be reaching for a knife. And when asked whether he'd driven the brothers there for some sort of revenge attack against Joshua Molnar, he again said he did not wish to answer.
Amy at the court in Stockport, thank you.
To the rest of the day's news, and a scheme in Lancashire set up to support victims of domestic abuse during lockdown has helped over 1,000 people. Police have teamed up with NHS specialists to provide a joint response to reports of abuse. Victims can be taken to immediate safety and also given help with long-term plans. Police say prosecution figures have increased by almost 30% since the scheme was launched.
The Chief Minister of the Isle of Man has set out his new vision for the island in a document to be debated in Parliament. Priorities include a climate change roadmap and an updated transport strategy. Government are now asking members of the Manx public to get in touch with their own views on the direction of the island.
Part of the whole approach of this is to, very early stage, we're only 3 weeks into the administration, to set out the stall for the future direction, but then actively welcome input and participation and debate of this document. So it will be debated in Tynwald next week. It will be consulted upon, and we absolutely encourage for people to give their views on it.
Well, some sad news for you now from the world of football, and tributes have been paid to one of the great voices of the sport, Gerald Sinstadt, who's died at the age of 91. His career began here at Granada Television.
And welcome again to Kickoff. The big name this week is Lou Macari, the man who chose Manchester United.
Sinstadt was a mainstay of our football coverage in the 70s and 80s, covering 4 World Cups. ITV Sports said he was a brilliant broadcaster and one of the first to call out racist abuse from the terraces. Now, on the eve of Remembrance Day tomorrow, Edge Hill University has been gifted a priceless journal kept by a soldier from Lancashire during World War I.
Yeah, this is all about William Bradshaw. He wrote in harrowing detail his time fighting on the Western Front and when he was a prisoner of war before he returned home to his family.
Paul Crone was lucky enough to see his journals arrive at their new home.
Then came the Pells, with their brief but glorious history. On the green slopes at Knowsley, they drilled in their shirt sleeves and were issued with uniforms.
And one of those legendary Liverpool pals who joined up to fight in World War I was this man, William Bradshaw from Lancashire. But William didn't just survive the horrors of the Western Front in France and being held as a prisoner of war. On his return to England, he wrote a journal capturing in minute detail his life as a soldier. His exquisite works have now been gifted to Edge Hill University in Ormskirk.
The way that William wrote is incredibly beautiful because he was a really clear writer. So we're able to actually read it because it's very legible. But he also clearly has an ability in terms of being able to write things very matter of fact. So he gets to the point quickly, he describes things.
William's work will now be preserved in Edge Hill's archives and includes his account of being taken prisoner by the Germans in the spring of 1918. He would remain a POW until the end of the war, when he was able to return home in December 1918. So this is from William's journal on the day he came home from the war after being held as a prisoner of war. Here he goes. I then tapped at the window frame, then listened. Quietness reigned for a moment. Instantly, as I called their names, their cries went forth. My daddy's come, my daddy's come. The door was then quickly opened and I entered hastily to greet my wife and children and to be greeted just as a loving family would be expected to do after such a long separation and the many trials and tribulations I'd had to endure in German hands.
There's just bits of it where he's just trying to explain himself. There's other bits where he's talking about other people, he's talking about losing friends, you know, what it's like to be a prisoner, and then the coming home bit, you know, magic.
William died in 1969, and it's also worth noting his son Charles fought and survived World War II and also wrote about his time in the army. But it's William's poignant memories of World War I that will have the most historical significance.
We know that we can use this to help teach the next generation about the First World War. These kind of documents will really help people understand what it was like to be in the war, and that's so important that this is remembered and that people understand the experiences of those who served in the war.
His work will now be safe for future generations to read. Paul Crone, ITV News, Ormskirk.
Yeah, and as Paul said, it is so important for future generations to be able to read those incredible documents. I don't know about you, but I got shivers down my spine when we were hearing his account of him being greeted by his family for the first time. Unbelievable stuff. Well, tomorrow, Remembrance Day, we'll be talking to D-Day veteran John Dennett, who's 97, about why for him wearing his poppy this year is particularly special. Well, this year's Remembrance Day service marks an incredible 100 years since the poppy appeal began. It was started by the Royal British Legion and has raised millions to support veterans of conflict and their families.
Last year was the most challenging in its history when collections were stopped for the first time. Earlier, I asked the Royal British Legion's area manager, Alison Bunn, how the centenary is being marked.
The poppy is a symbol of support for the armed forces community, and obviously, like many other elements of society, the armed forces community has been hit particularly hard by COVID, and we've been working very hard to support them. So this year, every poppy does count.
Now, COVID, for the very first time, the poppy collections were cancelled last year. That didn't happen in the Second World War. So what kind of impact did it have on your fundraising?
So like many charities, we obviously didn't raise as much as we would have liked to last year. So previously we'd raised about 50 million during our Poppy Appeal, which just demonstrates the level of support for the Armed Forces community. Last year we raised about 30 million. So this year we really want to get back out there with our collectors face to face and encourage people to buy their poppies this year to support the Armed Forces community.
So that's a £20 million shortfall when the need is even greater. Tell us about some of the people you've been trying to help.
So I manage the welfare team in Greater Manchester and Lancashire. And just to give some context, we have about 380 active cases at any one time. So that means about 350 individuals or families that we're providing support for. So that might be anything from someone who's found themselves homeless to somebody who needs financial support or somebody who needs a training grant to enable them to progress into employment.
And you said to me earlier that a veteran is living in a toilet, is that right?
So yeah, so we've recently picked up a veteran who has been street homeless and called in and had found himself living in a public toilet. So we will be obviously helping him to find housing that's sustainable going forwards.
That is quite a frightening situation. So as you say, every single poppy counts.
Yes, and most members of the Armed Forces community will make a successful transition into civilian life. But I think one of the things about COVID was that hit people in ways that they hadn't anticipated. So a good example was an individual who had moved from being in the army into working in the hospitality industry. He had a successful second career, but found himself unemployed at the start of COVID because obviously the hospitality industry was hit really hard. And he was a veteran who didn't ever think he would have to come to the British Legion for support. But when he found himself having financial difficulty because of the loss of his job, he gave us a ring and we were able to help him.
Now, this is your centenary. Do you think we'll still be wearing poppies in 100 years' time?
We'll definitely be wearing poppies in 100 years' time. They're a symbol of support for the Armed Forces community, of hope, and when it brings communities together, it's a part of the fabric of our society as remembrance.
But you are looking to be more biodegradable and sustainable?
We are, so hopefully you can recycle your current poppy, and we are looking to develop a poppy that is degradable.
So this is your centenary. What are you most proud of in terms of your work?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that the British Legion can pick someone up who is in crisis, who has got multiple needs, and put an arm around them until they no longer need our support. And that's really important to the Armed Forces community.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
They do some incredible work, and Alison said there's no right or wrong way to wear a poppy, just wear it with pride.
And we wear our poppies with pride.
We do. Still to come tonight.
Now, some called him the fifth Beatle, with an exclusive look at how Brian Epstein is being honoured in his home city.
And after a rather murky start to the day tomorrow, that wind will be picking up. Find out all the details in the weather going forward a little later on in the programme.
And here's Mary with details of the ITV News at 6:30.
Coming up on the programme, we reveal the hidden cost of Britain's housing crisis. Mould, cold and accidents contribute to a £1.4 billion bill for the NHS. We'll be hearing from some of those affected. Also ahead, new revelations in the Meghan versus the Mail on Sunday legal battle. And I'm still standing. Sir Elton bounces back from hip surgery to get a gong from Prince Charles. So do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Now next, do you remember your favourite and not so favourite teacher at school?
Yeah, I certainly do. I could talk all day about my favourite teacher. My least favourite teachers, probably best not to say very much. The very best ones can have a lifelong positive impact on our lives.
Well, the Global Teacher Prize has been set up to recognise an exceptional person who's made an outstanding contribution to the profession. And a teacher from Liverpool has been shortlisted for the coveted coveted award.
He certainly has. David Swanston teaches visually impaired children at St Vincent's School and has already made the top 10 for the world's Best Teacher award. If he wins first place, the school will get $1 million prize.
That's $1 million, and Jennifer Buck's been gauging the excitement as the virtual ceremony got underway to announce the winner.
Well, anticipation is building here at St Vincent's School in Liverpool. There were 8,000 nominations from 121 countries. And David Swanston, a teacher here, made it into the top 10 of the best teacher in the Global Teacher Prize. Now, very soon we will find out if David can take that top spot. And David joins me now. So how are you feeling ahead of the big ceremony?
I'm really, really excited. It's been a real privilege to be part of the Global Teacher Prize, and yeah, I'm excited to be part of that ceremony tonight.
Tell me a little bit about your work here at St Vincent's.
So my work here at St Vincent's has been shaped very much around for many years teaching children with visual impairment, and particularly adapting sports for the visually impaired. So a lot of my work goes on how we can make sports more accessible for children.
What do you enjoy most about that job?
The outcomes from our pupils, watching them progress, looking at the many achievements that they gain. But yeah, that's the most important thing, and the thing I enjoy the most is the outcomes of our children and young people here.
Now, this competition and this prize is huge. You could basically be named the best teacher in the world later on. How does that feel for you, and what difference would it make for the school?
For me, on a personal note, it's a great achievement. But I think most importantly for St Vincent's and our community and our students, it would make such an impact on our children, young people and the school, because this Global Teacher Prize has really risen the profile of the school, and it's something that we're all very proud of here.
And $1 million prize, that's not to be sniffed at. How would you make the most of that money here?
Well, no, it's not yet. A lot of our work goes into a project we run called Sightbox, which is ultimately a physical box that we send across the world to developing countries. And that's to increase access to sports and physical activities to children in blind schools across the globe. So we would use some of the funds to kind of scale that up, and then a number of projects across the city region to support health and wellbeing initiatives, and then also physical facilities here in school at St Vincent's.
Well, it all sounds brilliant. Earlier on I spoke to some of the pupils here at St Vincent's, and for them there was only one clear winner.
I think Mr Swanston should win because he's a genuinely nice person, and he just cares about all the students he teaches, and overall he's just an amazing teacher and he deserves it so much.
The things that Mr Swanston does that just makes it so special is just the way he makes lessons fun, enjoyable, but also the ways that he tries to play upon your skills and qualities. Obviously everybody's got skills and qualities and things that they can build upon, and Mr Swanston notices that and he plays upon that.
It would be really exciting, and and I'm very proud of him, and I would be really proud for him to win the award.
We will know in the next hour if David Swanston wins that coveted Global Teacher Prize. We'll have updates on the late bulletin and of course on the website. But for now, all that's left to say is best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. We are rooting for David, and even if he doesn't win, he is still a star in the eyes of his pupils and, of course, the team here at Granada.
He's their hero, isn't he?
He is indeed. Next, we've been given an exclusive first look for the statue for the fifth Beatle, Brian Epstein.
He discovered the little-known group playing in Liverpool's Cavern Club and then masterminded their global fame.
Epstein was gay and was forced to hide his sexuality. His will be the first statue for an LGBTQ+ figure in Liverpool city centre.
At a time when there's been a spate of homophobic hate crimes in the city, this statue is not only seen as long overdue, but sends a powerful message.
It certainly does. Our reporter Victoria Grimes has more from, where else? The Epstein Centre in Liverpool.
5 o'clock in the morning at chilly London Airport is nothing to a Beatle worshipper. In fact, some of them have been here all night to welcome the idols home from their third American tour. The fans have their hair to keep them warm, at least.
He's known as the fifth Beatle, most often seen standing quietly in the background. But it was Brian Epstein who was the driving force that propelled the Fab Four to stardom and made sure the world knew their names. And now Brian's being honoured with a statue in his home city, and not, say those behind it, before time.
And there's over 70 statues of the Beatles all around the world, yeah, but none of Brian. And yet,
none of this would have happened, arguably, without Brian. And so we just felt like if anywhere was going to honour him in such a manner, it would have to be Liverpool. And it's not just the Beatles, of course. He also managed the whole roster of artists, such as Jerry and the Pacemakers, Cilla Black. Even if you take the Beatles out of the equation, that's really worth honouring.
The statue's being made at a foundry in Wales, where our cameras were given exclusive access to see Liverpool sculptor Andy Edwards at work. The piece perhaps a final part of the story of his Beatles statue, which stands on the waterfront.
60 years ago this year, Brian walked the however many steps it is from his shop Nems in the centre of the city to the cavern and first saw the Beatles play and of course signed them not long after. There has been a real danger that Brian will be forgotten as part of that incredible story. I love the Beatles anyway, and this is like such a great part of cultural history. And to have spent this time with Brian in my workshop's been a real privilege.
Well, we all know the story. It was, of course, here on Matthew Street at the famous Cavern Club that Brian Epstein saw the Beatles for the very first time. That, of course, was the original entrance over there. But in actual fact, his office was literally just a 2-minute walk. And that office was in this building here above his record shop, which is where he first heard about the Beatles when somebody came in and asked for one of their records. So it's quite fitting, really, that the statue will be placed here.
And it'll be the first statue for an LGBTQ plus figure in the city centre.
I mean, he famously wasn't out, of course, so because he didn't feel he could be, because he would have been criminalised. But yeah, why shouldn't we in Liverpool have such a statue? It's all about representation, isn't it? And putting our arms wide open.
It's really extraordinary to think that Brian Epstein played on this stage here, didn't he, back in the 1950s?
That's right, right there. And he was in an Amdram production of something called Larger Than Life.
You can kind of feel him almost, can't you, in here, in the atmosphere, that he's still
Yeah, you can,
and
of course,
around.
he would have adored this because it's so lavish and lush. This was very, very Brian.
And apparently, Paul McCartney himself, he had a few suggestions of his own, I believe.
That's right. Well, he said, he did. I don't really remember him wearing a tie. He wore cravats. So Andy changed the tie into a cravat.
Wouldn't it be great if Paul McCartney decided to come and unveil it?
Yes, it would. Any chance, Mac? Any chance, La? We get our people to talk to your people.
It's hoped the statue will be unveiled in January. So, Mr McCartney, if you're watching, Victoria Grimes, ITV News, Liverpool.
Sure he's watching.
I'm sure he is. What a great tribute.
Now let's get the weather. Here's Joe.
He's chucking it down. Might as well get on with them jobs, Gary.
Wipes in the bin, though. Oh, good lad.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Thank you. Very good evening to you. A few glimmers of brightness around today, hopefully a little bit more tomorrow. Plenty of cloud going forward, but lots of dry weather to look forward to. Tonight we'll see some extensive fog patches developing, particularly for Cheshire, Derbyshire way, which will be with us to start the day tomorrow. And then as the wind picks up through tomorrow afternoon, blowing all that low cloud, mistiness and murk away. The next few days will be rather cloudy, but there's room for a few bright or sunny spells at best. High pressure will dominate things from Saturday onwards. Before that, we do have a system bringing a spell of rain for Friday. Nothing too much to worry about. It clears through fairly promptly, and then we'll see that high pressure building in for the weekend. Back to this evening's details then. Some drizzle out of thicker cloud, but really a dry, quiet night in prospect, and temperatures will fall to around 5 or 6 Celsius rurally. We have those fog patches developing through the early hours of tomorrow morning, chiefly for southern parts of the region, but they really could crop up anywhere. Something to bear in mind if you're travelling first thing tomorrow. On to tomorrow. The sun will be up at 7:29, setting at 4:20 tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow then, a bit of a foggy start in places, but largely dry. The sunshine should get out through the course of the morning for a time before cloud builds again from the southwest tomorrow afternoon. A freshening wind, bits and pieces of drizzle in the air, but a largely dry day. And temperatures tomorrow will be similar to those of today. 12 Celsius, 54 Fahrenheit, but that wind lending a slightly chillier feel to proceedings. And then looking ahead, there'll be some rain around on Friday. That will clear through. Saturday offering a bit of brightness, around average temps.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
He's doing us now.
Top fella.
And that's just about it for tonight's programme. Don't forget to keep up to date on our website, itv.com/Granada.
Talking of the website, right now you can see some dramatic footage of a lifeboat crew rescuing 3 people just before their yacht capsized in rough seas near the Isle of Man.
As ever, many thanks indeed for your company and thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.